She came in humming. That's what stuck with me. Not the smeared lipstick, not the tangled hair, not even the fact that she was holding one heel in her hand like it personally betrayed her at some point during the night. No, it was the humming. Like she'd just left a spa, not a bar, or a man's apartment, or wherever the hell she'd been for the last 8 hours. Don't ask, she giggled. Not drunk. Buzzed maybe, but mostly smug. There was no shame in her eyes, just the kind of arrogance that festers when someone thinks they've figured you out, categorized you, put you on a shelf like an old bowling trophy. Forgotten, but still technically theirs. I didn't ask. I just looked at her from behind the ledger. She didn't notice what was in my lap. Probably assumed it was another boring spreadsheet or one of the estate audits I ran like clockwork. She didn't care much for those unless it meant a new watch or accidentally leaving her platinum card at brunch. She tossed her keys onto the entryway table. They landed on top of a wedding photo. Ironic. A frozen smile under a jangling reminder of what she thought she could get away with. She vanished down the hallway. Bedroom door. Click. Not even a good night. I closed the ledger and opened a different folder, the one I'd been building quietly for 6 months. It wasn't about catching her. It wasn't even about revenge, not at first. It was about not being the fool. About not letting silence be mistaken for weakness. The folder had it all. Hotel invoices charged to her emergency-only card. Rideshare drop-offs logged within blocks of one particular condo. Always a little past midnight. Always returning around 4. Designer lingerie purchases that she told me were gifts from a friend. The same friend who signed 2 receipts, Bryce. One in cursive, one in sloppy block letters, like he was in a hurry. I flipped to the last page. The morality clause from her family trust, which she signed without reading. Most people don't read trust agreements. She sure didn't. Too many legal words, too much assumed safety. But I read it. And I never forgot Clause 4C. Any recipient engaging in conduct which may, in the eyes of the trustees, bring disrepute upon the family, shall have their distribution subject to review and immediate suspension by majority vote of trustees. She made me one of those trustees the day we got married. A gesture of trust, she said. Ironic. I picked up my phone. It was 4:02 a.m. The number I dialed hadn't been used in years, but the voice answered on the second ring. It's time, isn't it? He said. Bring the file. Wake her parents, I replied. And then I hung up. I didn't go to bed. I didn't rage or pace or cry. I just poured a black coffee and sat with that folder, watching the sun begin its crawl above the trees. I thought about how many dinners I pretended not to notice her texting under the table. How many times I heard her lock herself in the bathroom to take a call. How many gaslighting attempts I'd let slide just to keep the peace. You know, I recently saw a stat that over 90% of people who enjoy stories like this never hit subscribe. If you're one of them, maybe this is the time. It's what keeps our team digging up the most brutal, quietest, most unexpected revenge you've never heard. Anyway, I stayed right there in the den until 6:07 a.m. when I heard her parents' car in the driveway. At 6:09, the doorbell rang. At 6:10, her father walked in first. Stiff-backed, dressed like he hadn't slept. Her mother followed, mascara already smeared from something she'd been told in the car. And at 6:11, the man in the gray suit stepped into the room, calm as ever. He didn't need to introduce himself. I knew him. So did she. She just didn't know why he was there yet. He nodded toward the folder on the table between us. Shall we begin? He asked. The real beginning wasn't when she came home at 4 a.m. The real beginning was when I stopped pretending I didn't already know. The first thing she did when she woke up wasn't check the time. It was groan at the sun pouring through the curtains like it had something personal against her. She winced, rubbed her eyes, and reached instinctively for the phone that wasn't there. Left in the car? In someone else's apartment? She couldn't remember. Didn't really care. She sat up slowly, still in last night's black silk dress, one strap halfway off her shoulder, mascara flaking beneath her eyes. Her head was pounding, but not from alcohol. From the fog of trying to remember what lie she told when she walked in. Or maybe it was just guilt, though that required a level of self-awareness she'd never bothered cultivating. As she reached for her robe, something caught her attention. Voices downstairs. Multiple. One of them familiar. Her mother? She frowned. Her mother wasn't a pop-in type, and definitely not before 7 a.m. Another voice responded, lower, firmer. Male. Not her father. Colder. Clipped syllables. Legal tone. She tied the robe loosely, shuffled out of the bedroom barefoot, and patted down the stairs, tightening the sash as she descended, more annoyed than alarmed. Probably something stupid. Her dad's always having those board crisis calls. Maybe her husband was just playing host to one of them. What she wasn't expecting was the man in her armchair. Her armchair. The gray one she had custom upholstered. She once told her friends she liked it because it made her feel royal. The man sitting in it now had the composure of a guillotine blade mid-drop. Slim, late 50s, maybe early 60s, immaculately tailored charcoal gray suit, a leather portfolio perched on one knee, hands steepled like a surgeon about to make a precision cut. And next to him, her mother, crying, not sobbing, not blubbering, just leaking tears silently, one hand over her mouth like she'd seen a car crash and realized too late it was her own family in the front seat. Across from them, her husband. He didn't stand, didn't speak, just sipped his coffee slowly, eyes on her like he'd already read the final chapter of the book she didn't even know was about her. She stopped mid-step, one foot still off the final stair. "What the hell is going on?" she said, voice dry from sleep. The man in the suit turned his head slightly, nodded once, opened the leather portfolio, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I'm here on behalf of the family trust," he said. "Shall we begin?" No good morning. No introduction. No warmth. She looked at her mother, who quickly dropped her eyes. Then at her husband, who offered only a small, unreadable nod. Not smug. Not cruel. Just inevitable. The blood in her arms drained. Her stomach churned, not from nausea, but recognition. Not of the man, but of the moment. Something irreversible had begun, and she was very, very late to it. "I don't understand," she tried again, softer this time. The man opened a folder, methodical. "You don't need to. Not yet. But you will. We'll walk through everything, chronologically. Fairly. Clearly. The documentation is exhaustive." Documentation? Her husband finally spoke, tone casual, like he was commenting on the weather. "Sit down, Mel." She didn't move. He leaned back. "Or don't. Either way, it's happening." She turned to her mother again. "Mom." But the woman only shook her head slightly, covering her mouth again, tears streaming. The kind of crying that doesn't need sound anymore. "Is Dad here?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Not yet," her husband said. "He's reviewing some things with the other trustees. He'll join us once we've covered the basics." "Trustees?" She felt the floor tilt. I mean, she looked back at the man in the armchair. "This isn't real. This isn't some intervention. You can't just barge into my home and—" "It's not your home," the man corrected politely. "It belongs to the estate. Held in trust. You're a beneficiary. For now." She swallowed. Hard. He continued. "This is not an intervention. That would imply someone's trying to save you. This is a review." She looked around. At her mother, still crying. At her husband, still sipping his coffee. At the stranger sitting where she used to read her novels. And then, finally, she sat. Because somewhere in the pit of her stomach, she already knew. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a dismantling. The folder made a soft, deliberate sound as it slid across the oak table, like a scalpel brushing steel. She didn't touch it, just stared at the edges of it, as though even grazing the leather cover might set off an alarm she couldn't unring. Her husband tapped it once, gently. "You should open it." She didn't move. The man in the armchair, his voice level, precise, said, "This is your copy. It's already been reviewed by both senior trustees. Your parents." That got her attention. She looked sharply at her mother. But the older woman still wouldn't meet her eyes, arms folded tightly against her stomach like she was physically trying to hold herself together. Then she turned to her father, who had entered silently minutes before, standing in the corner near the bay window with arms crossed, expression carved from granite. "You read this?" she asked him, voice trembling. "You actually—" "I did," he said. "Nothing more." She reached for the folder with jerky, reluctant fingers and opened it. The first page was a color photograph, slightly grainy. A hotel lobby, captured from a security feed. Her and Bryce, half embraced, her fingers toying with the button on his shirt. Timestamped. Watermarked by the property. No ambiguity. She blinked, heart racing. Second page, another hotel. Different city. Different week. She's laughing, hair pulled back, Bryce standing too close again. Another timestamp. Another watermark. Third page, an invoice. Room service for 2. Champagne. Chocolate. One room booked under Bryce H., but paid for by a card ending in the same 4 digits as her emergency expenses account. Fourth page, screenshots. Dozens of them. Her messages. Not just flirty, but humiliating. He's like a Labrador, always loyal, always waiting. If only he weren't so boring. It's not cheating if you're not emotionally involved, right? Bryce, he still thinks I'm going to Napa with Lisa this weekend. I swear he'd believe it if I told him I was joining a circus. 5th page, a highlighted excerpt from the family trust document. Clause 4C. Any beneficiary whose conduct may bring reputational harm to the family name or its fiduciary holdings is subject to review and immediate suspension of disbursements upon a majority vote of trustees. She kept flipping. Her fingers started trembling. At page 7, she slapped the folder shut like it was burning her palms. This is insane, she hissed. You went through my private. Your financial records, her husband interrupted smoothly, are reviewed quarterly. And you used a trust-issued card to fund those little getaways. That made them our business. Not just mine. The family's. She turned toward her father. You're siding with him? His eyes didn't budge. I'm siding with the documents. You signed them. You lived under them. You broke them. Her voice cracked. But I'm your daughter. He said nothing. She spun to her mother. Mom, please. But the older woman simply let out a broken sound. Not a sob, not a sigh. Just something hollow. Her chin quivered. Still no eye contact. She felt the oxygen leave the room. You're trying to destroy me, she said, half laughing. Over what? Some photos? Some texts? This isn't a crime. No, the man in the suit agreed. It's worse. It's negligence of legacy, of duty. You were entrusted with the name and resources of a family that spans 4 generations. And you used that access like a teenager swiping daddy's card. Her husband's voice was quieter, but sharper. You didn't just cheat on me, Mel. You cheated on everything your name stood for, on everyone who vouched for you. You thought it was just me who'd notice. But the whole structure? It noticed. And it has teeth. She stood suddenly, the chair scraping against hardwood. I won't be humiliated like this, she snapped. The lawyer tilted his head. Then perhaps you should have chosen a different armchair to commit your humiliations in. That cut deep. Because that chair, her chair, had been her little throne. The symbol of comfort, of home. And now it was being used as a courtroom witness. As evidence. She staggered backward. Toward what? She didn't know. There was nowhere to go in her own house that didn't already feel seized. You have no idea what I've given up to make this marriage work, she barked, eyes now glassy. You think I'm the villain? You have no idea what it's like to be with someone like you. Her husband didn't react, which made it worse. Because that calm wasn't apathy. It was precision. Control. The same kind of control it took to spend 6 months collecting documents instead of confronting her over dinner. The kind of control that scared her more than yelling ever could. The lawyer reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim envelope. Sealed. This is your formal notification of proceedings, he said. Per your father's directive, your access to trust funds is under immediate review. Pending outcome, all discretionary distributions are frozen. He placed it on the table. Signed by 2 trustees already. One more vote, and it's enacted. She stared at it, not reaching, just breathing, shallow, uneven, stunned. Take your time, he said. We'll wait. She stared at the envelope like it was ticking. A neat, unassuming thing. White paper, blue seal, her name printed with bureaucratic elegance. It didn't scream. It whispered, but the silence in the room made it deafening. The man in the armchair adjusted his glasses and tapped the portfolio again. Shall we continue? I haven't agreed to anything, she snapped, still standing. He nodded once. You did. When you said I do. That hit her like a slap. She blinked. Excuse me. He flipped to a page already dog-eared, turned it slowly, deliberately, and slid the binder so she could see. A marriage contract, signed by both of them, countersigned by 2 attorneys. Her father's signature on the witness line. Her own initials next to paragraph 7. I'd like to direct your attention, he said, tapping twice. To section D, subparagraph 3. Her eyes scanned the paragraph. Her lips moved as she read. In the event that either party becomes aware of behavior by a named beneficiary that may be construed as financial impropriety or conduct damaging to the public image of the family trust, said party shall be granted secondary oversight powers under the direction of the senior trustees, with full investigatory and disciplinary authority. She let out a brittle laugh. This is fake. It's notarized, he replied, tone flat. Filed. Witnessed. And enforceable. I never saw this. You initialed it. I don't remember it. The lawyer didn't blink. For most beneficiaries, that's not uncommon. We've found that those who assume invincibility tend to skim. She turned to her father, eyes narrowing. You let this happen? He didn't move. Just gave her the same look he used to give the market reports in the Wall Street Journal. Detached, clinical, mildly disappointed. I insisted on it, he said. After we saw what happened with your cousin Andrew. That was completely different, she shouted. He tried to start a nightclub in Tulum with trust money. Her father shrugged. And now you're spending 5 figures at boutique hotels in the city with a man named Bryce who doesn't even have a last name in any of the receipts. Tell me how this is different. She turned to her mother. Desperate now. You knew about this? Her mother's voice was a whisper. He warned us. We didn't want to believe him. Not at first. That pause, not at first, sliced through her like glass. Because in that moment, she realized her husband had come to them, told them, pleaded with them to rein her in. Maybe months ago. Maybe before the first hotel charge even hit the card. And they didn't believe him. Until now. You're all siding with him? She asked, voice shaking. Him. Her mother wiped her eyes. We're not siding with anyone. We're protecting what's left. That phrase. What's left? Like she'd already scorched the rest. I thought you all trusted me, she muttered. We trusted your judgment, her father corrected. You've made it complicated to continue. The lawyer spoke again. As of this morning, the discretionary authority your husband holds has been expanded. He's now empowered to initiate a temporary freeze on all disbursements and can petition for full suspension of your beneficiary status pending review. She stared at her husband, jaw slack. You're enjoying this. He tilted his head. You think I wanted this? Oh, don't do that. She sneered. You collected evidence. You planned this. You waited for this. He set his coffee down. Finally, then leaned forward, eyes dead calm. No, he said. I waited for you to stop. You didn't. She had no retort. Because it was true. He'd given her out after out. Asked questions. Let things slide. Gave her space. And she filled that space with Bryce. With lies. With a sneer every time she thought he wasn't paying attention. But he had been. More than she ever realized. You don't have the guts, she said weakly. To cut me off. Not really. His reply was a whisper. Watch me. And suddenly, the armchair didn't feel like furniture anymore. It felt like a courtroom bench. And she wasn't the defendant. She was the exhibit. She looked around the room she once decorated, filled with curated plants and expensive minimalist art pieces, and saw nothing she could claim as hers. Not the couch. Not the money. Not even the love. Because he had all the signatures. And she had a contract she never read. He didn't raise his voice. Not once. Instead, he reached into the side pocket of the portfolio and pulled out a document sealed in transparent plastic, its notary stamp gleaming under the chandelier. With the precision of someone handling an artifact, he laid it flat on the table between them. Clause 7b. Printed in bold, double-spaced, and centered at the top of the page. Motion for immediate suspension of disbursements due to reputation-damaging conduct. Signed at 4:30 a.m. Initialed by her father at 4:32. Witnessed by her mother at 4:34. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a guillotine blade, frozen mid-drop, now released. The lawyer tapped the page once with his index finger. Per the authority granted under Article 7 of the Family Trust Constitution, your husband, acting in the capacity of secondary trustee, has moved to freeze all outgoing disbursements to you, pending a final vote from the Oversight Committee. Her mouth hung open. I didn't get to vote on anything, she shouted. The lawyer didn't flinch. You're a beneficiary, not a trustee. I am the trust, she screamed. This house, this account, this life was built around me. I was raised in this system. You were raised by it, her husband said quietly. But you never built it. The distinction landed harder than he probably intended, because she immediately turned to her father. Dad, he looked her squarely in the eyes for the first time that morning. You did this to yourself. I had one mistake, she snapped. And you're going to throw me to the wolves over one. 6 documented instances, the lawyer corrected. And that's just the ones we found without subpoena authority. Her breath caught in her throat. She spun to her mother again, tone shrill. You witnessed this? You stood there and watched them do this to me. Her mother didn't respond. But the answer was in the way she folded her hands over her stomach, like she was trying to hold her guilt in with sheer pressure. There was no defiance in her eyes. Just heartbreak. This is my inheritance, she said, lower now, quieter, but somehow even more venomous. The lawyer leaned back slightly, adjusted his cufflinks, then delivered it like a scalpel. No, there was no malice in his tone, no righteousness, just fact, like announcing the time of death. She staggered back half a step. It was the kind of thing you expect to see in a movie, not in your own damn living room, in your silk robe, still wearing the perfume from your affair. Let's not be dramatic, she tried. There's due process. You can't just turn off my access. I live off that. Clause 7b allows for temporary freezing while a full review is conducted, the lawyer explained. You'll have an opportunity to appeal, of course. But until then, your distributions are suspended. Effective immediately. She looked at her husband. You planned this. He didn't blink. I planned for the possibility you wouldn't stop. That's when she went for her phone. Except it wasn't in the kitchen or on the hallway console. She turned, searching, suddenly frantic, scanning every countertop like the phone itself might be the escape hatch. You won't even let me fight this? She spat, hands shaking. What am I supposed to do, huh? You want me broke? He stood then, slowly, and walked to the desk near the window. Opened a drawer. Pulled out a small, navy blue checkbook with her name on the cover. He flipped it open, held it up. The last entry. A transfer for $4,700 to an unnamed consultant. The memo line simply read, Weekend Wellness Retreat. He tossed it onto the table. That was your fight, he said. That was you deciding you had better things to do than be accountable. She looked down at the checkbook like it had betrayed her. How long have you been tracking me? She whispered. Her husband didn't answer. Because that wasn't the question. The real question, the one sitting unspoken between them, was how long had she underestimated him? She let out a strangled laugh. You always hated confrontation. You let me walk all over you for years. He tilted his head. That wasn't weakness. That was patience. Silence. Then, from the lawyer, we can pause here if you'd like. Her father stepped forward. There's nothing to pause. Let's continue. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. Because the truth was settling in. This wasn't a warning shot. This was the verdict. And she was already cut off. She didn't walk to the study. She marched. A hurricane in silk. Her robe flared behind her like the cape of someone still convinced she had power. She didn't look at anyone in the room. Not her mother. Not her father. Not the man in the armchair still calmly reviewing his notes. And certainly not her husband, who remained seated like he was watching the final act of a play he'd written 6 months ago. She flung open the study door with enough force to rattle the frame and stormed inside, slamming it behind her. The laptop was already charging on the desk, lid half open, exactly where she'd left it the night before. She yanked it open fully, fingers slamming the keyboard, her breath shallow, sharp. Each keystroke sounded like a gunshot in the stillness of the morning. She opened the first account, her personal one, the guilt account, as she used to call it. The one she had him fund every month as a gesture of independence, $15,000 here. A little extra for therapy or art classes or self-care, depending on which justification was trending that week. Balance, $0. Available, $0. She froze. Hit refresh. Same result. She clicked the second tab, switching to the joint account. The one she used when she needed to contribute to something visible, like throwing a check at her friend's charity or ordering gifts for her family, so it wouldn't look like she'd checked out years ago. Balance, visible. But next to it, a new banner she'd never seen before. Transaction privileges suspended, trustee oversight engaged. She clicked on transfer funds. Access denied. What? She muttered it out loud, louder with each click. Every failed attempt met with another pop-up box she couldn't override. Finally, she reached for her phone, then remembered it wasn't in the room. Still missing. Still silent. So she clicked over to the bank's website and hit the chat function. No response. She tried the Contact Your Private Advisor button. A moment passed. Then a message. Please call for identity confirmation and sensitive account matters. She dug through the desk drawer for the landline handset like it was a lifeline. Punched in the number from memory. It rang twice, then connected. Her banker answered. But not the way he used to. Not with the usual chipper, obsequious tone. Not the friendly, "Hey there, Mel, what can I help you with today?" This voice was flat, measured, professional in a way that immediately told her the script had changed. "This is Andrew from Client Services. How may I assist you?" "Andrew, it's me," she said, forcing lightness. "Melanie, I'm trying to access a few of my accounts. Something's glitching." He cut her off, gently. "Ma'am, I have to inform you your profile status has changed." "What do you mean changed?" "Effective this morning, your beneficiary status within the Mitchell Trust has been marked under review. Per the directive from the primary trustee, any pending or future transactions now require written authorization from the oversight group." She blinked. "Wait, are you saying I can't move my own money?" "I'm saying," he said carefully, "that pending resolution of the matter, you no longer meet the criteria for unrestricted financial autonomy under your current trust classification." "You're reading a script," she snapped. "I am," he said. Because everything I say right now is being recorded. Her mouth went dry. Andrew, she hissed. We've known each other for 6 years. You helped me set up my Paris travel portfolio. You told me which designer cards to avoid. This is me. Fix this. A pause. Then, soft, like he regretted it. I received the directive at 5:11 this morning. Your husband's name was on the letterhead. Signed and countersigned. My hands are tied. She stared at the laptop screen. Every account she used. Every exit she thought she had. Gone. I'll sue, she said. That is your right, Andrew replied. But you'll be paying out of pocket for counsel. Legal retainer payments are currently also flagged for oversight. That was the moment the full weight of it landed. This wasn't just embarrassment. This was exile. Every financial artery she had was clamped shut. She wasn't just being punished, she was being contained. Fiscally quarantined. She didn't say goodbye. Just hung up and stood there, staring at the screen. Then, with a sound that was more animal than human, she slapped the laptop shut with both hands, hard enough to rattle the desk lamp. For years she'd mocked her husband for being too boring to cheat, too polite to leave. Called him a gentleman like it was a synonym for fool. Now she realized what he'd actually been all this time. The architect. While she'd played dress-up with her double life, he'd been drafting blueprints for her collapse. And now the scaffolding was gone. And all that remained was the fall. She didn't even bother changing out of the robe. Her hands were shaking too much to dress properly anyway. And the thought of slipping on a pair of jeans or trying to pretend that lipstick might help made her stomach turn. She grabbed her keys off the counter with the kind of jerky, uncoordinated motion that made her knock over the vase beside them. White lilies, her favorite. Her husband had brought them home 2 days ago. She didn't stop to pick them up. The drive was a blur. Her knuckles went white on the wheel. At a red light. She caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Eyes puffy, mouth set in a crooked line. Last night's eyeliner now wore paint. Her hair a mess. It didn't matter. It wasn't about presentation anymore. It was about rescue. Because if anyone could talk some damn sense into the world, remind everyone who she really was, it was Mia. Mia, her best friend since college. Mia, who sat through every brunch rant about her emotionally frozen, spreadsheet-obsessed husband. Mia, who helped pick out the dress she wore the first night she slept with Bryce. Mia, who toasted her birthday with the words, "You deserve chaos. Don't you dare settle for lukewarm." She pulled into the driveway without even texting ahead. 3 quick knocks. Then 2 more, impatient, desperate. The door opened. Mia appeared in a soft sweatshirt and leggings, barefoot, mug in hand. Her hair was still damp from a shower. No makeup. Just clean, calm, effortless. Melanie burst out the second she saw her. They're trying to erase me. I'm cut off, Mia. My own family is siding with him. The trust lawyer came to the house, sat in my chair, and they froze my accounts. My parents signed it. And he just sat there, sipping coffee like he didn't spend the last year setting me up for this. Like I'm some criminal. Mia didn't move. Didn't wave her in. She just stood there, leaning against the frame. Melanie finally paused, expecting the usual reaction. An eye roll, a gasp, maybe a barked, "That manipulative bastard." Instead, Mia's brow creased slightly. Then she stepped back a few inches and said, "He called me." Melanie blinked. "What?" "Last night," Mia said softly. "He called me. Before everything started. Said I should expect a visit. That you might come here scared. Or furious. Or both." Melanie's voice dropped. "He warned you. He told me the truth." Melanie scoffed. "His truth." Mia's face didn't shift. "The documents, Mel. The charges. The transfers. The hotels. The messages. He had all of it. In order. Dated. Cross-referenced. He didn't spin anything. He just showed me." "You," Melanie's breath caught. "You let him tell you all that without even asking me first." "I didn't have to," Mia replied. "Because I already knew something was off. You told me you were going to lease his vineyard. Then I saw you post a picture of Bryce's dog on your private story. You said you were done. That it was just fun. But every week, it kept going. The lies. The cover stories. You laughed about it." Melanie's face twisted. "You're siding with him now?" "I'm siding with the truth," Mia said, finally stepping fully out onto the porch. "You are my best friend. And you weaponized that friendship to make yourself feel better about cheating on a man who was doing everything to protect your name. Even when you weren't." The words hit harder than she expected, because they were said without venom, without dramatics. Just clarity. "Do you think I'm evil or something?" Melanie snapped, a bitter edge rising. "You think I'm the first woman to screw up her marriage? To need space? To want more than a man who tracks receipts for a living?" "No," Mia said quietly. I think you're the first woman I know who managed to betray everyone in her life and still walked around like she was the victim. Silence. Melanie opened her mouth, closed it. She took a step back, shaking her head. This is unreal. He poisoned you. No, Mel, Mia whispered. You did. The door began to close. Slowly. No slamming. No theatrics. Just a soft click of finality. Melanie stood on the porch alone, staring at the spot where her best friend used to stand beside her in every storm. Laugh with her. Lie with her. Defend her. And now? Gone. She turned around slowly. The street looked different. Colder. Narrower. The houses more judgmental. As she walked back to her car, the last sliver of her support system, social, emotional, reputational, slipped quietly out from under her. And she realized he hadn't needed to take everything away. He just needed to let gravity do its work. She sat in the car outside the house for a full 10 minutes, engine running, fingers clenching the steering wheel hard enough to make her knuckles ache. The sun was setting, casting long, judgmental shadows over the driveway. The same driveway where she used to roll her eyes whenever he brought home another spreadsheet or talked about trust amendments over dinner. Now she could barely breathe looking at the place. The front lights were already on. He always turned them on when it got dark, even if no one was expected. Houses should feel lived in, he used to say. Funny, it didn't feel lived in anymore. It felt like a courtroom with wallpaper. She walked up the path slowly, heels clicking over stone like footsteps in a mausoleum. Her phone was still missing. Not that it mattered. No one was calling her. Mia had shut the door. Her mother wasn't returning messages. And her father had sent a one-line reply to her frantic email. Decisions have consequences. No greeting. No signature. Just that. She entered the house quietly, almost expecting silence. But there was music. Soft jazz. Coltrane. His favorite. She followed the sound into the dining room and froze. The table was set for two. White linen napkins. Candles. Wine. The good glasses. Her seat, was pulled out slightly, waiting. He stood at the head of the table, wearing a navy button-down and slacks, like it was just another Thursday night. He was pouring wine into a single glass. Just one. She stepped inside, hesitant, suspicious. What is this? She asked. I figured you'd want one last dinner, he said. She stared at him. He motioned to the chair. You're welcome to sit. She didn't move. This is insane. Probably. She hesitated, then took the seat. The plates were covered with silver domes, like he was hosting a private tasting. For a brief, disoriented second, she almost convinced herself none of it had happened. That the man in the armchair was just a dream. That Mia hadn't closed the door. That her accounts were still full. That Bryce was still a secret. Then she saw the envelope beside her plate. Not large. Not ominous. Just a single card, slipped partially out, the print visible even from her angle. She didn't touch it. He sat down across from her, folding his hands, watching her. I don't understand, she said quietly. Why are you doing this? He didn't blink. Because I was never your backup plan. I was the foundation. You just forgot. She stared at him, mouth slightly open. You built a life on something stable. Predictable. Me. But you started mistaking that for weakness. For boring. For safe. And you wanted thrill. Heat. Movement. So you danced on the roof of a house you never checked for cracks. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I know. I didn't think. You didn't. The candlelight flickered between them. She reached for the wine, but realized there was only one glass. He hadn't poured her any. You're not even going to toast me, she said, trying to laugh. It came out thin, metallic. He didn't respond. She stared at him. I messed up. Okay, I messed up. But this? Freezing my accounts? Turning my parents against me? That's not justice. That's cruelty. His eyes didn't waver. You know what cruelty is? He asked calmly. Cruelty is watching someone break the structure you spent years quietly holding together and smiling while they do it. Cruelty is gaslighting the one person who never left. Cruelty is rewriting the story so that your own betrayal feels like empowerment. She shook her head. This can't be permanent. You can't. They'll undo it. They won't, he said softly. Because now they see what I saw. They finally looked at the receipts. The timestamps. The patterns. They're not blind anymore. She looked down at the card. Finally picked it up. It was her new monthly allocation. The one her father had always joked was her freedom fund. Now it read $0. No decimal points. No notes. No conditions. Just zero. She blinked fast, eyes burning. I'll fight this, she whispered. He nodded once. I know. Tears welled. Please. Just talk to me. Really talk to me. Not like a trustee. Not like a lawyer. Like my husband. He was silent for a long time, then leaned forward, just slightly. You had a husband, he said. And you spent 2 years trying to replace him with a distraction who never even bothered to spell your name right on hotel forms. That gutted her. She dropped the card onto the table. It spun once before landing face up. I thought you'd always forgive me, she said, barely audible. He stood, collected his glass, didn't say another word. As he walked out of the dining room, the faint sound of Coltrane followed him, trailing behind like a ghost. She sat alone, dinner untouched, the plate across from her still steaming. And for the first time in her life, she was truly uninvited. She didn't sleep, not because she couldn't, but because sleep would have made it real, final. And if she stayed awake, maybe some version of yesterday could be unwritten. So she sat by the window all night in the same silk robe, knees pulled to her chest, a blanket draped around her shoulders like it might shield her from the consequences crawling in under every doorframe. The house was too quiet. Even the refrigerator's hum sounded accusatory. She kept glancing toward the driveway. No movement. No headlights. He didn't come back. At 6:47 a.m., just as the sky turned a watery gray, a white car she didn't recognize pulled up to the curb. A man in a courier uniform stepped out. He didn't even glance at the house, just walked up, placed a crisp envelope on the front doormat, took a photo for proof, and left without knocking. She knew what it was before she touched it. Still, she opened it with the shaky hands of someone clinging to denial like it was oxygen. The envelope was heavier than expected, quality paper, embossed seal. Legal grade weight. The kind you can't crumple easily. The kind designed to be final. Inside was a single-page letter, neatly folded. She opened it slowly. The first line hit her like ice water. Effective immediately, Melanie Ward has been removed from the upcoming trust disbursement cycle pending unanimous vote of reinstatement. Her stomach twisted. She kept reading. A paragraph of formal language. Legal justifications. Citations from trust bylaws. Then, in handwriting, her father's, unmistakable in its angular elegance. This isn't punishment. It's preservation. She blinked. Hard. Below that, in bold. Clause 8.3. Restoration of beneficiary rights requires unanimous approval from all currently active trustees. There were 3 signatures at the bottom. Her father, her uncle, and the final line. Pending, your husband. Her breath caught. Unanimous. She let out a strangled sound. Not quite a scream, not quite a sob. Somewhere between a gasp and a curse. Then she dropped the paper like it had burned her hands. It fluttered to the hardwood, landing face up, legal ink smirking back at her like a sealed fate. She could fight her father. She could even charm her uncle, eventually. But him? She had destroyed him, humiliated him, spent years dismissing him as a quiet footnote in her story. Now he was the key to unlocking the very life she was born into. And he didn't even need to lift a finger. All he had to do was say nothing. He had all the power now. Not because he stole it. Because she handed it to him. On a silver platter. Along with the passwords. The receipts. The trust amendments. The moral high ground. She stood there for a moment, staring down at the letter. Then, suddenly, violently, she kicked it across the room. It slid under the console table, bumping into the leg with a soft thud. But that didn't fix anything. The rage came in waves now. Sharp. Pathetic, directionless. She grabbed the nearest throw pillow and hurled it. Then another. Then a candle. One shattered. The other just rolled under the couch like it was hiding from her too. She screamed. Loud, guttural, wordless. The house echoed with it. But nothing changed. She stood panting in the middle of the room, robe twisted, hair matted, surrounded by the wreckage of things that didn't fight back. She was a trust fund princess with no kingdom. A social butterfly with no hive. A wife who gambled on her husband's apathy and lost to his silence. She reached for her phone, forgetting again that it was gone. She considered calling her father, but the note made that pointless. She considered going to his office. But what would she even say? Please let me back in. No. She knew what this was. This wasn't a warning shot. It was a lock clicking into place. A vault sealed behind her. And the only person with the code was the man she thought would never stop waiting. It was after sunset when the silence shifted from oppressive to surgical, clean, absolute, humming with the kind of finality that doesn't need to shout. The kind of silence that follows a verdict. Or a eulogy. She sat on the living room floor, knees tucked to her chest, surrounded by the debris of earlier rage. A shattered glass votive, couch cushions tossed to the ground, the remains of a silk robe torn at the shoulder seam. She hadn't cleaned. She hadn't moved. Even the letter from the lawyers still lay beneath the console table, untouched since she kicked it across the room like a child throwing a tantrum at a locked door. No one had called. No one had stopped by. There were no apologies, no dramatic rescues, no sudden reversals. Just the soft buzz of the refrigerator, and, eventually, her phone. She had found it wedged between the seats of her car earlier in the afternoon, dead and dusty. She plugged it in out of instinct, not hope. It lit up at 7:02 p.m. One new message. No sender name. Just a link. She tapped it, hands trembling only slightly now. Less from nerves, more from depletion. The article loaded. New foundation chair appointed. A quiet force steps forward. And there it was. The photo. Her husband. No, not her husband anymore. Standing beside her father. Both in suits, both shaking hands. Her father smiling fully for the first time in years. And him. He wasn't grinning. Wasn't smug. Just calm. Steady. The way he always looked in board meetings he never talked about. The ones she used to forget he even attended. She used to call him a dependable man. It was the kind of compliment you give a filing cabinet. But now, looking at that photo, she realized the truth. He hadn't taken anything from her. Not the money. Not the house. Not even the title. He had simply removed everything she took for granted. Removed the net she'd walked on like a runway. Removed the shelter she dismissed as dull. Removed himself from the equation she used to define her own superiority. The article went on to praise his measured leadership, his behind-the-scenes diligence, his unwavering discretion throughout a challenging transition. There was no mention of her. Of course not. Her name wasn't part of this story anymore. She had been edited out like an unnecessary footnote. She stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Then slowly, a soft creak of wood. Across the room, in the gray armchair, her armchair, sat her mother. She didn't know when she'd arrived. She was just there, like a ghost she hadn't noticed walking in. Still in the same pale sweater from earlier. Still with tear stains around her eyes. But this time, her gaze wasn't soft or apologetic. It was tired. You had everything, her mother whispered. Not cruel, just honest. Melanie opened her mouth to respond, but there was nothing left to say. No defense, no spin, no clever deflection. The screen on her phone dimmed to black, and the room, finally, was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't waiting. This time, it was done.